All right. Welcome, and welcome to all of you who are with us on live stream as well. Great to see all of you. Anybody here tonight who I've never seen before? Never been here before? How lovely. Are you from other cities, or are you from in New York? Anybody from outside New York? California? Fort Lauderdale. Well, that's not a surprise. Colorado? It's great. Yes, sir? Denmark. Welcome. Is this your first time to the United States? Glad you're here. Wonderful. All right, before we do anything else, please introduce yourselves to the people who are around you, to your right and to your left, and in front of and behind you, and that includes you guys on live stream. I love you too, thank you. Very sweet of you to say thank you. You're very kind to me. Okay, you ready, everybody? We take a deep breath. We see in the middle of our mind a little ball of golden light, and we watch this light as it begins to grow. Larger and larger, until now it covers the entire inner vision of our mind. And we see for ourselves within this light a beautiful temple. And we see a garden that surrounds the temple and a body of water that flows through the garden. We see that the inside of the temple is lit as well by this same beautiful golden light. And here we are. For we have been drawn together by the power and in the presence of God. And we devote our time spent together, all of our relationships and experiences of one another, to Him. And we pray that the most Holy Spirit be upon us, and that we thus be lifted above and beyond the turmoil, the sadness, the limits of this world, to the endless love and peace that lay beyond. And so it is. Together, we all say, amen. I'm going to begin this evening reading lesson 38 from the workbook of A Course in Miracles. There is nothing my holiness cannot do. There is nothing my holiness cannot do. So before I read the lesson itself, I want you to just take in that sentence. There is nothing my holiness cannot do. And you might ask yourself whether or not you believe that there is nothing my holiness cannot do. Remember, this is a practical course, and it's not metaphorical. So it's not saying this is lovely symbolism. It is saying there is nothing your holiness cannot do. So you might just want to witness your own thinking. Do you actually believe that? Because to the extent to which you do not believe it, it is not true for you. Now notice when it says, there is nothing my holiness cannot do. It's not saying there is nothing I cannot do. It's not saying there's nothing my self-will cannot do. It's not saying there's nothing my body cannot do. It is saying there is nothing my holiness cannot do. Your holiness, it says, reverses all the laws of the world. So, you know, you take this stuff in, either superficially or deeply, it's up to you. But think about what these words are saying. There is nothing my holiness cannot do. Your holiness reverses all the laws of the world. So the laws of the world, the laws that prevail within three-dimensional reality, your holiness reverses all the laws of the world. It is beyond every restriction of time, space, distance, and limits of any kind. Your holiness is totally unlimited in its power because it establishes you as a son of God, at one with the mind of his Creator. Through your holiness, the power of God is made manifest. Through your holiness, the power of God is made available. And there is nothing the power of God cannot do. Your holiness, then, can remove all pain, can end all sorrow, and can solve all problems. It can do so in connection with yourself and with anyone else. It is equal in its power to help anyone because it is equal in its power to save anyone. If you are holy, so is everything God created. You are holy because all things he created are holy. And all things he created are holy because you are. In today's exercises, we will apply the power of your holiness to all problems, difficulties, or suffering in any form that you happen to think of, in yourself or in someone else. We will make no distinctions because there are no distinctions. In the 4 practice periods, each preferably to last a full 5 minutes, repeat the idea for today, close your eyes, and then search your mind for any sense of loss or unhappiness of any kind as you see it. Try to make as little distinction as possible between a situation that is difficult for you and one that is difficult for someone else. Identify the situation specifically and also the name of the person concerned. Use this form in applying the idea for today. In the situation involving blank, in which I see myself, there is nothing that my holiness cannot do. In the situation involving blank, in which blank sees himself, there is nothing my holiness cannot do. From time to time, you may want to vary this procedure and add some relevant thoughts of your own. You might like, for example, to include such thoughts as, there is nothing my holiness cannot do because the power of God lies in it. Introduce whatever variations appeal to you, but keep the exercises focused on this theme. There is nothing my holiness cannot do. The purpose of today's exercises is to begin to instill in you a sense that you have dominion over all things because of what you are. In the frequent shorter applications, apply the idea in its original form, unless a specific problem concerning you or someone else arises or comes to mind. In that event, use the more specific form in applying the idea to it. There is nothing my holiness cannot do. Think of the American political crisis. There is nothing your holiness cannot do. Think of international terrorism. There is nothing your holiness cannot do. Think of the environmental desecration. There is nothing your holiness cannot do. Think of global poverty. There is nothing your holiness cannot do. Think of criminal injustice and economic inequality. There is nothing your holiness cannot do. Think of mass incarceration and sex trafficking. There is nothing your holiness cannot do. Now, the first thing is to simply allow that in. If it's true, just if it's true, what does that mean? You know, I went to see Wonder Woman, and how many of you have seen it? You know, it's so interesting because before the movie, I was noticing how many of the trailers were these cartoons. You know, it's like our culture is just obsessed with this stuff, isn't it? Whether it's Spider-Man or Superman, Wonder Woman, all of this. My first thought looking at all these trailers was how obsessed we seem to be with violence. Because in all of these movies, there is just this extraordinary amount of violence. And it is true, of course, that that is a problem we have, whether it's television or movies. As though there's not enough violence in the world, we keep feeding ourselves more of it. As though there's not enough fear and horror, we keep feeding ourselves more of it. But it's also true that in all of these cartoon movies, not only is there the dark force, the evil force, destroying cities, destroying civilization, that is true. But there's also, in movies such as Wonder Woman and Superman, an otherworldly force of good that is manifest in a human being. And so it's interesting because you might say, looking at movies like that, we need to take this stuff less seriously. But on a spiritual level, we need to take these movies more seriously. First of all, if you look at just Wonder Woman, you know, she comes from an island where she's raised by Amazons, and there are no men on the island. So a man later asks her an understandable question like, how did you get conceived and born? And she gives a casual reply, as though probably anybody would know this. She says, you know, my mother crafted me from clay and then Zeus took it from there. And we all know the great scene between Christopher Reeve and Marlon Brando when Christopher Reeve was first raised by his father. The issue from a spiritual perspective, whether you're looking at Clark Kent, who only pretended to be a regular human being. The truth of the matter is, you're not Clark Kent, you're Superman. Clark Kent was the fiction. And this idea that any of us have, that we're just a human being, and all we have are human powers, that's the fiction. You know, Superwoman, Wonder Woman, Superman, these are basically Christ figures. They are basically in cartoon form, and cartoons are very powerful. You know, I think the movie Avatar was a total work of genius. Avatar told the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in comic book form. The Avatar totally said what's going down on this planet. And Wonder Woman and Superman tell a story about what's going on in us. Now, it's interesting because when Clark Kent heard that something was wrong, he was on it. Everybody else went, oh my God, we don't know what we're going to do. And they took out all the biggest powers that they had to try to deal with these terrible problems. But there was a limit to how much human, institutional, technological power had. There was a limit to how much power that the human powers only could exert in order to prevail over the dark forces that were plaguing the planet. But Clark Kent, when he heard that there was a problem and he heard that there was going to be human suffering, or that there was human suffering, and that's exactly what happened in Wonder Woman. In Wonder Woman, she responded. It's interesting because we're talking about the superhuman power in you is the power in you that has more compassion for the suffering of other human beings than the person that you think you are does. So it's interesting because even in Wonder Woman, when she saw that an entire village was going to be killed if they didn't help, the man said to her, no, 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 we have to stay with the strategy. We have to stay with the strategy. We can't save everyone. And that was not okay with her. You know, I was reading about Gal Gadot, the woman who is the star in Wonder Woman. And as probably you know, she's Israeli. And like all Israelis, she served 2 years in the Israeli military. And it's interesting that they cast her because her body language, this woman trained combat soldiers. And her body does seem very comfortable with a stance that I'm in business. And it's interesting because I read a quote from her where she said, speaking of her tour of duty about her time in the Israeli military, she said, it's 2 years and it's not about you. And that is the issue of the difference between the Wonder Woman in you and the Superman in you and this fictional you. because the fictional you thinks it's all about you. And that is why you don't have wings, and that is why you don't have superpowers. Our superpower does not come from thinking it's all about me, and I can do anything. That's a big lie. Even our crowd gets into that one. I can do anything. No, you can't. There's a lot you can do, and there's a lot you can't do. And A Course in Miracles does say that those who have achieved the most on the planet have achieved only a fraction of what each and every one of us is capable of. But the point is, we are not now actualizing our divine potential because we have not yet achieved the consciousness that activates it. And that's what Clark Kent had, and that's what Wonder Woman had. It was absolutely not okay. They meant business. You know, it's not like, it's interesting because Clark Kent didn't put on his cape and then hear about terrible things that were happening and respond to them. That's not how it went down. He was just going around being Clark Kent, and then he heard about something terrible that was happening. His conscience was quickened. He was about business. He was about making it happen, that this was going to be solved, and that's when he got his cape. And the same with Wonder Woman. So when the Course in Miracles says there is nothing your holiness cannot do, it is pointing to a philosophy which argues that the symbolism of someone like us, of a Wonder Woman or a Superman, is actually speaking to the truth of who you are and the idea that you are nothing other than a regular human being. I mean, you are a regular human being, but the idea that you are nothing more than a body and you have nothing more than the powers of the world is a fiction. And every problem in the world is a reflection of the fact that humanity has forgotten who we are. Humanity is not awake to who we are, and it's not working. This sleep state that we have fallen into, the Course in Miracles says we have been asleep for a very long time. The Course in Miracles says we've been asleep for ages, and there has been no mass awakening, but it is time for one on the planet. Because the dreams that have come with our sleep, the Course in Miracles says, and this we know, have turned into nightmares. But the Course in Miracles says you don't go from a state of dreaming and the nightmares that have set in to a state of awakening. First, we must go back to happy dreams. Now, what is the happy dream? A world without war, a world where there is no global poverty, there's no injustice, a world in which, you think of, sometimes you look at situations and everybody's happy. Just these little snapshots, often little children are around, everybody's being sweet to each other. And you think to yourself, why can't it be this way for everybody? It's not like we don't have moments in our lives that work, that like everybody's happy, we're having a good time at the dinner table or with our kids or whatever. The issue is that is not the reality we have manifest. God didn't manifest a reality in which horrible things happen. We did. And that's extremely important that we understand that, the Course in Miracles says. Because even right now, with all the crises and all the stresses upon us, sometimes people will say things like, oh, well, God will help us. God only can do for us what he can do through us. So to say that God will help us, and he's like waiting, will not occur because something outside us gets slapped onto us. It happens because we make ourselves half the equation. That's what the Christ is. That's what Superwoman was. That Wonder Woman was Superman. That the Christ is mothered by your humanness and fathered by God. The real you, that's the metaphysical meaning of the Immaculate Conception. The real you is mothered by your humanness, but it is fathered by a power that is not of this world. And that's what the Christ within you is, and the Christ is the real you, Christ being one name. So the whole idea of the Superman in you, the whole idea of the Wonder Woman in you, is not fantasy. This is fantasy. But it's become a very dark and dangerous fantasy. Now, like I said, the Course in Miracles says that the nightmare, you do not go from the state of the nightmare to awakening. You go from the state of the nightmare to the happy dream. Now, you hear a lot of people these days say that, you know, the answer that the problems in the world is all a matter of consciousness. Well, obviously it is. Well, not obvious to people who aren't into this stuff, but to many of us that seems very clear because everything going on is a statement of where we see ourselves. So then some people go with that and they say, therefore, all we have to do is awaken. Well, that's not what the Course in Miracles says, because we talk here often about the difference between denial and transcendence. You can't just turn away from the unhappy dreams of the world and think because you're awakening, then the dreams will go away. Quite the opposite. When you are awakened, such as Wonder Woman and Clark Kent, what does the awakened person want to do? Someone tell me. Help. Superman didn't say, look, I can handle this in a second, but, you know, I'm busy. Wonder Woman didn't say, you people are crazy. I don't know why you live this way. She said, you're crazy, and I don't know why you live this way, but I am going to help. And there's a marvelous moment, and I don't want to give the movie away, but when someone performs an act of sacrifice for the common good, for something bigger than himself, that just empowered her. He had been inspired by her, and then her power was activated by him. Now, what does that mean in terms of all of us? What does that mean in terms of living in Western civilization today? What does it mean looking at the terrible problems we have in our country, the political crisis in American democracy, the environmental breakdown, international terrorism? We are living right now with so many stress points. And A Course in Miracles prides itself on being a practical course. It says this over and over in the Course. The Course in Miracles is not about some la-la philosophy that has nothing to do with what's going on here. It is a practical course, and it is said it is attested to by its effects, by its results. So the first thing you do is you look at all of the problems in the world, and you remember, as the Course in Miracles says, the first sentence, there is no order of difficulty in miracles, which is really another statement of there is nothing your holiness cannot do. So, you know, I saw a tweet, I made some comment about the state of the world, and I saw some tweet, I think it was a woman, and she said, well, if you're scared, I'm just going back to bed. Now, I'm not scared, but I'm awake, and I certainly don't feel like going back to bed. The Course in Miracles says, the rest you seek, you will not find from sleeping, but from waking. This is time for us to be awake, because the awakened state within you is the Superman within you. The awakened state within you is the Wonder Woman within you. The awakened state within you is the holiness within you. Your holiness is your wholeness. Your sleep, the racial consciousness being asleep, the human mind has fallen asleep to who we are. That is the sleep state in which the nightmares have come. So we wake up, and like I said, the Course in Miracles says that doesn't mean that then you ignore the dreams of the world. You are sent by God, the Course in Miracles says, into the illusion as a miracle worker. You are sent into the illusion in order to be the light that dissolves the darkness. So the awakening of consciousness is not, oh, it's all an illusion, therefore I ignore it. The awakening of consciousness, whether it's Clark Kent or Wonder Woman or you, the awakening of consciousness is, this is really bad, people are suffering, but there is nothing my holiness cannot do. Tell me what to do, God. And the Course in Miracles says each and every one of us has a particular function. And nobody is, the Course in Miracles says, all of us are special and none of us are special. All of us are Wonder Woman, all of us are Superman. So whether or not somebody happens to be manifesting it is irrelevant. The issue is for us to remember that that power lies within us, the power that I read about tonight, that it reverses all laws of time and space. There is nothing your holiness cannot do. So we can look at crisis in American democracy, we can look at encroaching fascism, we can look at environmental breakdown, we can look at international terrorism, and within the state of the dream, these things are scary indeed. but they are only scary until you remember who you are. Now, it says in Alcoholics Anonymous, every problem comes bearing its own solution. And that's exactly the point here. It is calling us to remember the solution, which is the solution is you. Now, once again, it's not, there is nothing my strategy cannot do, there is nothing my politics cannot do, there's nothing my self-will cannot do. It is, there is nothing my holiness cannot do. So our holiness is the recognition of who we really are. Now, when we realize who we really are, it begins, number one, with knowing that no matter what the problem, the power of God is bigger than the problem. Number two, as we say here all the time, the universe works like a GPS. So even though, Lord knows, we've veered off the track of righteousness, i.e. righteousness, and brotherly love dominating this planet, gosh, we've certainly veered from that. However, that the universe is self-correcting, so God already has a plan. The Course in Miracles says the moment there is a problem, the power of God, there is in the mind of God the answer to every problem the moment the problem occurs. Now let's think about what that means here. Okay, so democracy's in trouble, God's got it. On it. Environmental desecration, God's got it. On it. International terrorism, God's got it. On it, and down the line of all these problems. But once again, it's not like, okay, well, we just sit back because of what we said before. God cannot do for us what he cannot do through us. So the Course in Miracles says, first you know, because we've spoken here a lot recently how the Course in Miracles says miracles arise from conviction. You see that in Wonder Woman, man. She had conviction. She wasn't messing around. She had conviction. You see that. Women with conviction in America are often called hysterical today, if you notice that. So conviction, she had conviction. And Superman has conviction when he's in, it's so funny because when he's Clark Kent, he's kind of nebbishy, you know, a little nerdy. When he's Superman, he's got conviction. And it's difficult for us to have conviction when we think it's me against that craziness. But it's not you against that craziness. It's the power of your holiness, which is the power of God. As we say here all the time, you're the faucet, you're not the water. So the awakening is, I will not look away. That's not consciousness. You know, there's a lot of that these days. In the name of this superficial, artificial, faux spirituality, people giving themselves a pass on looking away from the suffering or the problems, right? That's not an awakened consciousness. That's not your holiness. Your holiness cares about the suffering of other sentient beings. Jesus cared about the suffering of other sentient beings. Jesus healed the leper. Jesus helped people. He didn't turn away the people who are suffering, who came to him for help. And neither does Wonder Woman, and neither does Superman. They go into a different place of consciousness, and in that different place of consciousness, that's where their superpower comes from. But if you're looking for your superpower, and you're only in it for yourself, you will not find your superpower, because your superpower doesn't emerge from the aspect of consciousness which thinks it's just about you. You know, I remember reading a story, I think it was from Jerry Jampolsky, and it was many years ago, and I'm not sure all the facts, but it was something about a doctor during the war, and there was a terrible outbreak. I think it was tuberculosis. I'm not totally sure. But it's something about a doctor who saw a patient who had was in a terrible problem, and the doctor knew that the patient had a terrible disease, but gave mouth to mouth, or something like that anyway, because in that moment it needed to be done, and the doctor did not contract the disease. Because of the consciousness. You know, somebody was telling me the other day, we all know about the fire walking, and you know, somebody was telling me the other day about their going to Omega and to a retreat, and she ended up dancing on the fire. You know, many people in our community love that. We love to go to retreats and find out that we can actually manifest situations where we rise above some earthly law, and that's great, but too often, even in our community, we make it like, therefore, I can have anything I want. But if you see a power like that, it's only so that you can have whatever you want, Somebody was telling me the other day about a business she wants to start. And I said, well, she said, but I feel that I'm blocked. And I said, well, what do you feel the blocks are? And she said, well, I feel that I don't really feel that I deserve it, and I this, and my this, and me this, and my blocks, and my deservedness. And I said, well, your entire conversation is about me and I, which is the opposite of unlimited thinking. So how are you going to put an unlimited result into such a limited construct? It's just about me is a very limited construct. So when Gal Gadot was talking about her military service, saying it's not about you. We say here all the time it's not about you, not just from an altruistic place of should. There's no should here. The principles of the universe, the spiritual principles, which are the laws of the universe, are not given to you from a should place. They're given to you from an attitude sort of like, just thought you might like to know. This is how it actually works. So when you are thinking about something larger than yourself, it's not you should do that so you'll go to heaven later. It's you should do that if you want to go to heaven, like within about 15 minutes, meaning heaven being an awareness of your oneness, which is your holiness. And so when you do anything, it could be your career. It's not just about the terrible collective problems that I was mentioning. It could be a problem in your marriage, in your love affair, in your friendship, anything in your life. That's why in that part where it says, there's nothing my holiness cannot do, it says, think of the situation. And I would assume when I read that, you already thought of the situation. To just allow yourself. The Course in Miracles says, if you will give the Holy Spirit even an instant, the Holy Spirit will respond fully to your slightest invitation. The problem most of us have, and we all know about when Dorothy was told by the good witch, all you had to do was click your heels together 3 times and say, I want to go home. That's all you had to do. And Dorothy said, why didn't you tell me that? I always thought at that point, Dorothy would have been just livid at that point. Why didn't you tell me? And remember what the good witch said? You wouldn't have believed me. That's why Jesus, when they saw that he wasn't drowning, that he was walking on the water, that he transcended the laws of time and space, he didn't say, oh, ye of little walking on water capacity. He didn't say, oh, ye who have not read the brochure about how to walk on water. He said, oh, ye of little faith. I read an article, sometime within the last year, about some marine biologists, scientists type people who have actually identified a particular geographical phenomenon inside the ocean, which is actually a tunnel. Because you know how like when there's a tsunami and the water goes back where it goes forward? And they have identified that there is actually a tunnel formation that is possible and that occurs inside the ocean. So when the Israelites stood before the Red Sea and the Red Sea parted, that might have, I'm not saying it was, I'm not saying anything other than we now know that there might actually have been, in actual Earth terms, at that point, a tunnel in the ocean through which they passed, and which then the waters, as the Bible says, the waters then came back together when the Egyptian soldiers tried to go through. In other words, we think that we have gotten so smart with all our technology and all of our science, but actually what humanity has done is that we have limited our imagination. By limiting our faith in God, we have limited our faith by whatever name you call it. By limiting our faith in a power that is higher than ours. We were born into this industrial age. We don't even know necessarily, if you don't really look at the history of it, how aberrational it is. This complete disconnection from our own inner life. And back in the late 1800s, the advent of the Industrial Revolution in Britain and then here in the United States, there were so many artists and philosophers there and here that tried to warn us we were doing a terrible disservice to ourselves by becoming so mesmerized by the powers of the outer world. And what it did is that when you become too mesmerized by the powers of the outer world, it's like a muscle that withers. A muscle has withered away, which is actually our own self-confidence, our own sense of our own power. If you think there's so much money and so much power in money, and you think there's so much power in government, you think there's so much power in business, and you think there's so much power in technology, and you think there's so much power in outer things, then it can lead you to lose the remembrance of how much power there is in you. And then what this does is it makes you less able to behave responsibly as stewards of those powers. Because within this world, money does have a lot of power. Within this world, government does have a lot of power. Within this world, technology does have a lot of power. But if I forget who I am, then I forget that those things are here to work for me. I'm not here to work for them. They are a means to an end. So even if you go to some retreat and you realize you can walk on fire, so there's nothing you cannot do, but it stops there, then it's not going to be a power that truly serves you. It's not going to be your wings. It's not going to be Superwoman, and it's not going to be Superman, and it's not going to be Wonder Woman. What's happening now is what is happening to us collectively is what happens to us individually when we are on a path, a spiritual path, a transformational path, and you look at the effects of your life and you take 100% responsibility. You say, oh, that's coming from me. And so if I want my life to change, I have to change. And if we want our human civilization to change, we are going to have to change. But you know what's happening on the planet collectively? In A Course in Miracles, it says some people would rather die than change their mind. That's how we're acting right now. We're acting like we would rather die than fundamentally change the way we order our civilization. And so a lot of us are thinking, this is insane, but you are afraid of being called insane if you point out that it's insane. And what we need are more of us with the courage to say, this is insane. Because all of us know what needs to be said. All of us know, people say, well, I don't know what to do, I don't know what to do. But in A Course in Miracles, it says, all of us are here. This is God's plan. God's plan, in response to all the darkness and the pain and the suffering of the world, the plan is called in A Course in Miracles, God's plan of the teachers of God. The Course in Miracles says, a teacher of God is anyone who chooses to be one. The Course says they come from all religions and no religions. They are those who have heard the call. And that the call goes out all the time, every aspect, every time, every space. We are all being called all the time. And we are not being called to do, we are being called to be. Because once you get into alignment with who you truly are, then, but only then, will you know what to do. Because if I'm only doing it from a place of it's all about me, then no matter what I do, it won't have wings. It won't be me with my superpowers. And with what's happening to us collectively today, the woman I know who was on one of the planes and lost her life on 9/11, if I were to think of 5 of the most loving people I've ever met, who, if you would want anyone to look at an American and think that's who Americans are, it would have been her. I mean, but she was there. So none of us are invulnerable to the collective karma. There are collective causes and collective effects. And the fact that you're loving is not enough. When I think of certain mistakes I've made in my life and ways that I've suffered in my life, the problem was not sometimes that I wasn't loving, it was that I was stupid. And so the universe wasn't going to save me from the effects of my stupid behavior just because I was a loving person. Do you know what I'm saying? The lesson wasn't just to be more loving, it was to be wiser. That's how cause and effect operates. And so we are stuck, and there are many, our biggest problems are not the collective situations that I mentioned already. Our biggest problems is our state of sleep, our naivete, our sense that institutions will handle it. Institutions have been doing a lot for you and me, but we have not been doing that much for our institutions. And we just thought that they would handle everything. Our political institutions would just handle it, could never get too bad. But when you look how disengaged so many of us have been from the situation, how little we have as a generation taken responsibility for our democracy, I mean, you step back and you go, well, it's not, I mean, we stopped working for it. Why are we that surprised it stopped working for us? But in any kind of shift and transformation, whether it's collective or individual, we're asked to recognize our mistakes. We're asked to atone for our mistakes. And when we do, that's a cosmic reset button. Now, you're not, anytime you change your life, you come to understand from a spiritual perspective that if I want my life to heal, I'm going to have to change. I can't, if some effect in my life came about because I wasn't the me that I should have been, I can't ask God to just heal the effects, but then go back to being who I was. That's why Jesus, when he healed people, said, go and sin no more. In other words, go, but don't go back to the old thinking, or you'll just produce this manifestation again. Does that make sense? So it's really, redemption is about radical change. Redemption is about radical change. That is your holiness. Superwoman and Superman, look at the gap between Clark Kent and Superman. Those are two very different personas within the same human being. And that's how different you and your holiness are. And your holiness is not something which it can be portrayed in something like a cartoon character, but the truth of the matter is that it is an invisible force that is the truth of who you are. Not only that, the Course in Miracles says, I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. The Course in Miracles says each and every one of us has a feeling that we think nobody else has, almost like a secret. And the secret that we all live with is, it's like I'm an alien here. All of us have had a thought sometime that I'm not really at home here. And the Course in Miracles says, the reason you feel like you're an alien here is because you are. This is not where you come from. This physical self did not give birth to you. This physical self is clay. This physical self is a priceless set of clothes, but this physical self is not who you are. And to the extent to which you think it's who you are, you will feel separate from the rest of life, you will feel separate from other people, and you will feel powerless. I mention often the image in the Course in Miracles where it says you are like sunbeams to the sun thinking you're separate from other sunbeams. You're like a wave in the ocean thinking you're separate from other waves. Obviously, there's no place where one wave stops and another starts, but think about the psychological difference between thinking you're one wave separate from the other waves versus thinking you're a wave at one with all the other waves. If I think that I'm just one wave, surrounded by all the billions of other waves in the ocean, how could I not live in terror that I will be overwhelmed by other waves at any moment? How could I feel important if I think that I'm just one wave in this huge ocean? But if I realize, no, I'm one wave pattern, but I'm part of the whole thing, then it's a completely different sense of who you are, and a sense of what your power is, and a sense of how safe you are here. Now, when we do realize that we are one with others, the idea of compassion for others, if I'm not just my body, and there's no place where I stop and you start, then not only what I do to you, I'm doing to myself, but what anybody does to you, they're doing to me. If there's injustice in your life, it's affecting me too, because the we is who we are. Now, if I realize that what's happening, injustice, as Martin Luther King said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. If I realize that injustice towards anyone, and that's what Clark Kent felt, that's what Superwoman felt, Wonder Woman felt. If you realize that, it is in realizing it that you are given the power to do something about it. See, if you don't have that level of compassion and that level of conviction, then you are more likely to say, well, what can I do? But you don't even stop to say, what can I do? When you know that there is nothing God cannot do, and when you know that the plan of the teachers of God is that each of us have an assignment. You just put yourself within that position of knowing that I am among the teachers of God. Anyone who chooses to be one, they are those who have answered the call. God used me. And there is so much, and this is why the only thing we have to fear is our own sleep state right now. I am not in any way minimizing the troubles that we have in our country, for instance, or the troubles we have on our planet. I'm not minimizing them at all. The Course in Miracles says, look at the crucifixion, but do not dwell on it. You can't just look away. That's just denial. So you have to look at it. Don't dwell on it, but you note it. Clark Kent knew what was going down. Wonder Woman knew what was going down and went right into it, because you go right into it according to the assignment that God gives you. Now, your own personal life is no less important. And as you apply these ideas in your own personal life, in this situation involving, so when we do our meditation, you might not find yourself in this situation involving Russia, or in this situation involving democracy, or in this situation involving the environment. You might say, in this situation involving me and my husband. In this situation involving me and drugs. In this situation involving me and the fact that I feel I'm sick. The personal is no more or less important. So if we're dealing, and one of the things about our personal lives and the application of these ideas to our personal lives, and by the way, I want to make this really clear. When I said the Russians, I meant the Russian government. If anything, we're not about the Russian people. Because this is not about the people on the planet, about governments on the planet. So, and nobody is, it's important to me because we don't know who might be watching, and this is not about groups of people. This is about systems and how they're operating. But when we apply these ideas in our own lives, it's very helpful. Because if I have seen a miracle in my own life, if I have known that in a situation involving me, something professional, me with money, me with health, me with work, me with friends, me with lovers, me with whatever, and I've applied, there is nothing my holiness cannot do, that my job, the Course in Miracles says, the primary responsibility of the miracle worker is to accept the atonement for himself. Now, get what that means. The atonement is the correction of your own perception. The correction of your own perception means a shift out of unholiness, which would be loveless thinking, to your holiness. Then, working a miracle occurs naturally, because miracles occur naturally as expressions of love. And it's always going to have to do with something where you're atoning for your own mistake or forgiving someone else for theirs. So many times people say, I don't know what God is saying to me. But I've learned in my life, it's not usually, Marianne, that you don't know what God is saying. It's that you don't like what God is saying. You do know. And sometimes it's so simple that we're trying to make it more complicated. Right? This stuff is not difficult, it's just different. And so many times you say, well, I'm struggling to hear the voice for God, and I just can't hear the voice for God. But then you ask yourself, well, every time I think about it, I think the answer is blank. You did hear, and the answer doesn't change. And that's why I think coming here is important, not here specifically, or situations like this, because when you're in a room with people who are also in a prayerful place, it's difficult to lie to yourself. Because it's it recalibrates. It's just to sit in a church, to sit in a mosque, to sit in a temple, there's a reason why these places exist. The Course in Miracles idea says ideas grow stronger when they are shared. So it's not like we don't know. We do know. The issue is not that we don't know what to do. So many of us in our own lives, we do know what to do. We're not doing it. And sometimes we're not doing it because it seems unrelated to what we think the problem is. How could my addressing that issue be part of that? Have you ever had that? Like, I'm asking for help in this area, and I keep getting guidance about this. Well, if you look deeply enough, it usually is that this has to do with the place your personality is stuck. Your character is stuck. Your integrity is out. Your impeccability, your wisdom. And that until those aspects of your selfhood are reclaimed, it doesn't matter what you do over here. Because everything you do is infused with the energy with which you do it. You know, we have this, categorization that's just of the ego. It's not of the spirit. So the categorization is here's your work life, and here's your health, and here's your money, and here's your love affairs, and here's your marriage, and here's your children, and here's your spirituality. That's all an illusion. There's one underpinning to all of this, and this is either the real you or not the real you. And whether it's in your work, or your love life, or your health, or whatever it is, are you standing in the space of that limited ego belief about yourself? Because if you are getting limited results. It's you. The issue in your career is you. The issue in your friendships and your love life is you. What's going on in our country and what's going on in our world is you. It's me. It's us. You know, when we did the Sister Giant conferences, I don't know why we called it Sister Giant. I just felt like calling it Sister Giant. And people say to me, where do you get that little ball of golden light? I don't know. I like it, a little ball of golden light. Nothing very esoteric. And I remember after this last Sister Giant conference, people would say to me before the conference, what's your goal? I would say just that people leave feeling lit up. And they said, but what are they supposed to do when they leave here? And, none of my business. Right? Just that they leave lit up. And at the end, I felt that. And there was one woman that came up and talked to me, and I swear, she was 2 inches higher. She seemed taller. She was walking taller. And I really got in that moment where the Sister Giant thing came from. We are bigger. We are behaving like we're smaller beings than we are because we have forgotten. The Course in Miracles talks about the difference between grandeur and grandiosity. That's the thing. With this ego, puffed up me thing, it's very grandiose. But the spirit is grand, but it's not grandiose. You know, if you look at our collective, the way we appear to the world, we're all puffed up, make America great again, America's best country in the world stuff, which is just, must make French people just cringe or whatever. Everybody else go, oh, I can imagine. But the flip side of that, grandiosity and childishness and silliness, is the fact we're not even appreciating the grandeur, which is the truth of this country. There is a grandeur at the essence of every person. There is a grandeur at the essence of every soul group. There is a grandeur at the essence of every religion and ethnicity and color and sex and sexuality and nation. And when you're so puffed up about who you are, it blinds you to what is truly grand about you and what is truly grand about your tribe. Truly grand about your country, truly grand about being human. And so it's actually a veil that obfuscates. And so that's why I love how in the Course in Miracles it says, you don't ask God for too much, you ask for too little. He says, why are you looking for the wings of a sparrow when the wings of an eagle have been given you? Why are you looking for the wings of a sparrow when the wings of an eagle have been given you? Now, you might need help. Let's say it's something about money. Well, maybe you don't know what you need to know. You ask God for money. Well, what the issue is there, maybe you need to know more about money. Maybe you need to know more about economics. Maybe you need a financial advisor. This is the thing. When you are in that place of your own holiness, you will attract whatever help that you need. That's the thing. It's not like sometimes there aren't material things that you need, but people will arrive to help you. You will be penetrable. You will be, when you have an actual, a legitimate need, because, God, I need help. I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to do this in relationship. Well, maybe there is a book for you to read. Maybe there is a retreat for you to go to. Maybe there is a particular counselor or therapist or teacher. It's not like there aren't ever things within this world that you would need to help you in your journey through this world. It's that when you are all huffed and puffed about who you are, you're not open to receive the help that would be there for you. And the thing is, if you have a need, the help is there. And if you have not recognized this in your life, I wonder if you've really taken a good look at your life. I certainly have. I have seen situations where, in retrospect, I could see that the person who could have helped me, the class that could have helped me, the situation that could have helped me, was right there, right in front of me. But I was so busy worrying about what I didn't have, right, that I was incapable of seeing what was in front of me because my belief was that I didn't have. But if you believe that that the universe is based so that either it's here or it's on its way, whatever your good is, and you also have to give up your sense of what good looks like. But if you hold, well, the universe is perfect, so I either have it and I don't know I have it. Well, what that's about is I'm not appreciating what I have and inhabiting the space I'm in. You know, you're worrying about the next job, but you're not doing the one you have very well. You know, how you are in this relationship, how you are in the house you already have, the apartment you already live in, the body you have. The ego always wants it to be different, later, over there, because the ego doesn't want us to live in the fullness and the glory of God. So we're thinking it has to be another place to live, another job, another person, another body, another age, whatever it is. So if we inhabit fully what is, then the universe is already set up to unfold the next great unfoldment. And so even if something's missing, you don't take an attitude like oh God, please, please. You take an attitude like, well, clearly I need help in that area, so I wonder who it's going to be. That's going to be interesting to see. I wonder who it's going to be. I wonder what it's going to look like. Because you assume it's on its way. And you remain alert. That's your holiness. So it's not that it doesn't operate within this world. And the Course in Miracles says you will still look the way you look, but as a teacher of God, you will have a sparkle in your eye that not everybody has when you have heard that call, because light is understanding. And the Course in Miracles says when you have made yourself available for God's plan of the teachers of God, you will have a light in your eye. And those who also have that light will recognize you. And those who don't have that light will wonder where you got that light. Right? And that's what's going on today, ladies and gentlemen. And as I said, the Course in Miracles says some people would rather die than change their mind. And the way the human race is behaving right now makes you wonder where we are collectively. But there is nothing that our holiness cannot do. It's not your personal life versus your life as a citizen. It's all of the above. And you happen to be born at this time during this particular situation. So clearly, we're the ones. But there is nothing God cannot do. But the point is, that means nothing outside you. The Course in Miracles says, you cannot heal your life without God's help, but God can't do it without yours. So your Wonder Woman and your Superman, all of us, the Course in Miracles says, nobody any more or any less, and that we have the thinking of the world is completely upside down, completely 180 degrees away from ultimate reality. And the Course in Miracles says that one of the things we have completely upside down is the issue of arrogance and humility. It's not arrogant to say there's nothing my holiness cannot do, because like I said, it's not there's nothing my body cannot do, there's nothing my self-will cannot do, there's nothing my, it's not saying that. It's saying there's nothing your holiness cannot do. And that is a power in you, but not of you, that can do for you what we cannot do for ourselves. And it is humble, not arrogant, to accept that. It is arrogant to think that you are any less, the Course in Miracles says. Because if you're any less, then you must not have been a creation of God. Because God is perfect, God only creates the perfect. So if you think you're any less than that, that's arrogant, because it's implying you think what you made yourself. So it is with great humility that we accept there is nothing that our holiness cannot do. And we grow past some of these thought forms that not only dominate our world, they dominate our community too. You know, communities have to look at their own shadows and their own limits. Anything is just about you, or I'm looking away because it's too toxic and there's nothing I can do, all that kind of stuff. This is time for us to own the greatness that is within us all. You know how in AA they talk about being powerless. The Course in Miracles, there's not a contradiction there. Because to recognize that we have all power is because our ego is powerless before God. Does that make sense? So let's apply this. Now, what comes up for you in this meditation, there is nothing my holiness cannot do. You go wherever your mind goes. It might be a very personal issue. It might be a collective issue. There is no right or wrong about any of that. So wherever, this is where you give your own subconscious mind a chance to talk to you, which it wants to do. But we don't give our own mind, you know, it's not like we don't have answers. It's that we don't spend enough time. I was mentioning last week that Blaise Pascal, the philosopher, said, all the problems of the world stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. The Course in Miracles says, and in Christianity this term is used, it's also used in Judaism, a small, still voice for God. The Course in Miracles says the ego speaks first and the ego speaks loudest. So if you just wake up in the morning, you don't do the lesson, you don't do prayerfulness, you don't do meditation, you just go right to the voices of the world, you're downloading that consciousness, and then you will be at the effect of it all day, and you will be thinking limited thoughts. But the Course in Miracles says, regarding these lessons, 5 minutes spent with the Holy Spirit in the morning is enough to guarantee He will be in charge of your thought forms throughout the day. So am I saying that if you do your lesson or some serious meditation like that for 5 minutes that you'll be a perfect enlightened master during the day? I'm not saying that. But I am saying from personal experience that the chances of your drastically blowing it are drastically reduced. And that's not nothing. And it's like any kind of weight training, isn't it? We are accumulating the anti-gravitational force. Your attitudinal muscles, your psychological muscles, your emotional muscles, just like you build your arms, your pecs, your abs, your glutes, whatever it is. You're building your conviction. You're building your faith, you're building your calm, you're building your serenity. And we need these for the journey ahead. Does that make sense? Let's pray. There is nothing my holiness cannot do. And now, allow that one issue. It's probably been calling to you over the last hour. And if it hasn't been, it's here right now. It's the name of a person or the face of a person. A situation that fills you with fear or anxiety or hope you have or vision. An idea you have or a concern about the world. It could be politics, it could be The environment could be terrorism, could be injustice. There's so many things that it could be. Whatever it is for you, you know it already. And now remember this, and say to yourself, in this situation, there is nothing my holiness cannot do. There is nothing my holiness cannot do. There is nothing my holiness cannot do. And now allow the Holy Spirit, voice for God, to illumine your mind. Where are you being called to change? Are you being called to surrender judgment or blame towards someone and expand your mercy and compassion? Perhaps to bless them more deeply than you have? To surrender the last vestiges of your grievance or condemnation? There is nothing your holiness cannot do. Are you being called upon to be more active, less lazy, to read more, to apologize to someone, to atone for an error, to make amends, to reach out to a loved one, to come clean about something, to show up more, to be more giving, to be less critical? Whatever it is, remember, there is nothing your holiness cannot do. And now within your thinking, think of those things that concern you. And remember, there is nothing my holiness cannot do. The voice for God itself will guide you, illumine your mind, reveal its wisdom, overshadow your consciousness, give you your assignment, whisper in your ear, lead you to your helpers, deliver you from turmoil, provide you inner peace. Your inner ear shall open, and ye shall hear. There is nothing my holiness cannot do. In whatever situation you are thinking of now, of the body, of the mind, of the spirit, remember, there is nothing your holiness cannot do. There is nothing your holiness cannot do. There is nothing your holiness cannot do. May these words and this thought be imprinted upon our consciousness. And so it is, we all say, Amen.
We love you, Marianne.
Okay. A few announcements, and then we will talk about anything you want to talk about, okay? Tears to Triumph is out in paperback. I'm very, very happy to say. I've been reading the, thank you very, very much. It was #1, I don't know if it is today, but yesterday it was #1 on the Amazon.com hot spiritual releases, whatever. Somebody want to say a page number and I'll read to you on that page? What? 43. But in avoiding our sadness, we avoid our lives. Learning from our sadness can bear great fruit, and avoiding it can have hidden costs. Our choice is between feeling the sharp pains of self-discovery or enduring the dull ache of unconsciousness that will last for the rest of our lives. Suppressing our pain isn't ending our pain, it's simply displacing it. The avoidance of sadness decreases our capacity to learn from it. For how can we deeply understand what we have failed to deeply look at? Sometimes it's in the midst of our tears that we come to understand a situation more fully. Even a happy life can have sad days, and sadness is sometimes simply a sign of growth. It doesn't serve any of us to cast a cheap yellow smiley face over almost everything, as though being sad is simply wrong. Just as storms have a function in nature, they have a function within our psyches as well. Just as babies who are never exposed to any germs can fail to develop the antibodies they need, people who avoid the fullness of their suffering fail to develop the emotional skills they need to deal with it. In recognizing the spiritual meaning of our sadness, we find the appropriate place to put it, in our psyches and in our lives. We come to realize the ways we have separated ourselves from love, from each other, and thus from the peace of God. Knowing this, the true source of our pain, we can then correct the problem on the level where the problem lies. So that's that one page. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. I hope it's good for you. And also, remember, I will be giving a free online seminar called The Spiritual Keys to Healing Anxiety and Depression. Well, it is free, but if you purchase the book. So in a way, I don't know if you really call that free. I mean, you know. So if you either purchase the book or you have already purchased the book, please attend this, and it will be made up of 2 calls, and those will be 2 live calls with me on July 12th and July 19th at 9 p.m. Eastern, which is 6 p.m. Pacific. I will discuss the concepts of the book in depth and answer select listener questions. Now, for those of you who are here, the books are available in the front and in the parlor room, and the volunteers will give you the info access to the online seminar with each purchase of the book, or go to Marianne.com or tearstotriumphbook.com, and you'll see all the information, and you can put it in there that you already bought the book or whatever. Okay? Aging Miraculously is miraculous, and I hope that people are continuing to enjoy that. I know I'm enjoying my own participation and writing for you and with you, and the videos and the comments I'm getting are great. So far, so good. If anybody's taking that class and it's not perfect for you, get on that forum and tell me, because I want to make sure that you get every bit of value that you want in that class. I want that to happen. We'll make sure it happens. Okay, I'm doing an in-depth weekend event called Miraculous Mind, Miraculous Life, really going into the in-depth concepts of the Course in Miracles and applied to our lives, and that's at the Omega Institute in Rhinebeck, New York, from June 30th to July 2nd. And that you can find out more about that at Marianne.com. Californians, I'm coming back on next Monday, July 26th. I will be at the Saban Theater in Los Angeles, and then also I'm going up to Northern California towards the end of July. So I will be up at Unity of Marin on July 28th, and in Santa Cruz, California, at the Rio Theater on Saturday, July 29th. So I hope to see all you Northern Californians there then, and go to Marianne.com for all of that. To all of our friends in London, I hope you know how much love we're all sending you. I'm sure so many people in the world are sending you love your way, our love your way. And I will be in London speaking at Alternatives at St. James on July 6th. And very much look forward to seeing all of you there. You are in our prayers. That city has really taken such a hit. And let's hold them in our prayers. Okay, everything else is Marianne.com. If you have any questions, please sign up on my email list if you haven't and you'd like. CDs of tonight's lecture and so forth, back there, etc. All of that, okay? All right, let's talk about anything that you want. Y'all were bringing me the questions from last week. Can you find out those for me, honey, while I go? Okay, let's talk about anything you want. Okay, yes, gentleman right there.
Hello, my name's Michael. So I have a, was it Human and Superman?
Okay.
Dilemmas.
Okay.
I have been feeling, and maybe it's also with Pride Week coming up,
okay,
that when a people fights for a flag, like you don't win the flag and then you put it in your closet. It seems to me that this rainbow flag, it's time for us LGBT people, and I just went to something that it's now LGBTQS. The S is the most important new addition.
Which is?
Straight. So my Superman would really like to take our LGBTQS, add lots more to it, and say we fought for this flag because we want to give it to the world now. And we want to make this flag the flag for everybody, because it's the first flag that's not based on nationality and borders and so on. And I really don't know how to make that happen, or to call out, maybe my Superman cape should be rainbow flag. I don't know, but there seems to be, I really would like this to happen. And I think it would be a big thing for us LGBTQS people to say we fought for it and now we want to give it to everyone.
Okay, if you feel that way, then you should. But that should not be necessarily what everybody else
Well, it's just an idea that has a lot of...
But let's talk about the concept.
Thank you.
So in alchemy, there's something called separatio. And it's you take all the pieces out, and they become their purified form, and then they can join at a higher level together. Even in this country, it's e pluribus unum, out of many one. Like when someone would say we should be a colorblind society. No, we shouldn't. That's a handicap. What we should be is a society that honors all the colors. The answer is not to minimize. You know, it's like when you say to black people, when they say Black Lives Matter, well, all lives matter. No, that's not cool. And so there are ways and times in which it is absolutely okay, in fact, the right thing to do, to stand, particularly, I think, when it comes to gay pride and LGBTQ and all that stuff, because there has been such shame that this new shift in the culture that is relatively new. I mean, look at someone like Oscar Wilde, and look at what gay people have had to go through. I mean, this is a very serious thing. People have died. Look at Matthew Shepard, wasn't even that long ago. So the fact that there is a standing of pride, I don't feel moved to take that away. I don't feel moved as a straight woman to say, okay, well, can that be me on there too? That to me diminishes something that deserves.
I agree.
Right, and I know it as a woman, I know it as a Jew, I know it as an American. If you only stand within your box, and it's held from a place of separation, then that's where the corruption and the darkness sets in. But if it's held in a very high place where you're not sacrificing your sense of who you are, but knowing it's not better or worse, and that the collaboration and the beauty, it's like when choir is always so beautiful. They were singing their notes, but their notes in collaboration with other people's notes. Do you see what I'm saying?
I think we're saying the same thing.
Cool, great, okay. Yes, ma'am.
So when we feel dishonored by somebody.
I'm sorry, when we feel?
Dishonored by somebody.
Dishonored by someone.
How can we avoid going into a place of so much anger that we don't like who we are?
Okay. Now, this is very interesting. The goal is not to avoid that place. You are a human being. Being dishonored will make you feel angry until you are an enlightened master. The Course in Miracles says, you are not perfect or you would not be here, but it is your mission to become perfect here. So from a Course perspective, you wouldn't avoid feeling it, but you would place it in a sacred container and put it in the hands of God. The only thing you would avoid is talking about it to the wrong people. The only thing you would avoid is expressing how you feel at that time to the person who dishonored you before you're ready to communicate. The only thing you would avoid is acting it out behaviorally in a way that would not serve the miracle. But you do not avoid the feeling. You have to be in touch with the feeling. He says in the Course in Miracles, I cannot take from you what you are not willing to release to me. So the Course is there is a profound honesty with oneself. Emotionally, and I feel this way. I feel this way, but I am willing to see this differently. That's the situation in the Course in Miracles. The sentence, which is over and over again, I am willing to see this differently. So you would say, I feel completely dishonored, but I am willing to see this differently. And then what will happen are things like, it wasn't even about you. You're taking this far too personally, or, and this is the ultimate, the real you cannot be dishonored. Because it's that line in the Course, the Christ in you cannot be crucified. You were not created, the Course in Miracles says, to be at the effect of lovelessness within yourself or anyone else. But when it first happens, you're human. I mean, Clark Kent had to go into the phone booth, and, it's a process. It's a journey. It's that 3 days between the crucifixion and the resurrection. So you feel what you feel, but you place it within a sacred container. You do not spew it. You have character. You do not spew it to everyone you know. You don't send stupid texts. You don't attack the person immaturely. You don't act out of the feeling. And that's what strength is. But strength is not that you're going to avoid your feelings, but that you're going to feel them within a sacred container with people who are safe to talk to about it, rather than every everybody you happen to be talking to at any given moment. Do you know what I mean? There's a difference between processing and self-indulgence. There's a difference between talking about it because you need to in a sacred container with a trustworthy person versus spewing. But none of that is to avoid the feeling. You just give it to God. I'm willing to see this differently. And then there is work. There is work. For instance, you will have friends and loved ones who will say, well, you should be angry because he completely dishonored you. Those are not the people you need to be around, however well-intentioned they are. Spiritual companions are those who will completely understand how you feel and really hold the space for you to reach that higher perspective, but not minimizing the pain that you feel. Does that make sense? Okay. Yes, these two people right here. This lady here and that gentleman there.
Thank you. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about limits.
Limits?
Specifically, when does accepting our limits actually...
When does what?
When is acceptance of our limits actually beneficial for our growth? You used the image of a sparrow, wings of a sparrow versus the wings of an eagle. And what if actually accepting that I have the wings of a sparrow and knowing that it is enough as it is, instead of striving for something bigger, instead of kind of suffering in the struggle of striving versus just accepting the container of what is and moving from the limits of the container?
Sometimes the limit means you need to work harder to develop your wings. You need to pay your dues more. You need to get more of an education. You need to go back and fix certain things. You're trying to skip steps. And you're using this idea of your being unlimited to justify not having to do the footwork or whatever. Sometimes, however, it's that that's not your talent. That's not your assignment. That's not your ability. But even if it isn't your assignment or your ability, that doesn't mean that your ability and your assignment is not unlimited. You know, the Course in Miracles talks about how all of the children of God are equal, but that obviously, it says, there's some line, that doesn't mean that, you know, everybody can sing like Pavarotti. It means everybody's got the genius of Pavarotti, but not everybody can sing like Pavarotti. Do you see what I'm saying? But, you know, I love that movie. Remember Amadeus? That's such an amazing archetype because he wanted to be Mozart, but he didn't. It wasn't until the very end he realized your genius is in assisting Mozart. So you might say, well, was Amadeus, then he was, not Amadeus, but then the assistant, is he limited? No, that's just as important a role. Now, is there a particular limitation that you feel you're struggling with within yourself?
Well, I have a specific example. I went to an Ivy League school and I wanted to study astrophysics, and even though I had a good mathematical and science background, it just didn't turn out the way I expected it to, and so I ended up in humanities, which in turn actually turned out to be kind of coming back to myself, because then now I'm studying, getting my MS in traditional Chinese medicine, so it kind of took me into another kind of groove, even though I still have to do a lot of science classes. But the point is that I had an idea, and then it didn't turn out that way, and I felt disappointed, but I was able to appreciate the lesson of staying within my limits, which infuriated me at first because I believe in my unbounded potential.
But is it staying within your limits, or was that the idea of how the universe wanted to use you was different?
Well, exactly that, because then I really started listening to destiny, not in from a resignation, resigning kind of a place, but from from an understanding that acceptance can be actually a tool for mobilizing.
Well, it's like what I said, the universe, to say that there are no limits does not mean that we're all a genius at astrophysics. That's not what that means. And the Course in Miracles would submit to you that your path is absolutely unlimited, but your assignment is different than you had thought.
But how do you reconcile the idea of unlimitedness with actual limit? Sometimes I still struggle with that.
Because limitlessness is of the spirit. It is not of the world. Of course, to say that the world, you know, in the book, in Tears to Triumph, I tell the story of Franklin Roosevelt, he was a man who had it all. He was governor of New York, and he was handsome, and came from a very wealthy family. He was tall, he was good looking, he had everything. And one day he went to the park, and he hadn't wanted to go, but he ended up going, and he drank from the water cooler, and he contracted polio. And his world obviously came crashing down. Within a few hours, he couldn't walk and never walked again. But when he went to Warm Springs, Georgia, or is it Hot Springs? I always get confused with those two. It's either Warm Springs or Hot Springs. It's in the book, Georgia. And people didn't know, and that's where people were taking these hot springs. It was probably called Hot Springs. I'm going to have to find that. Was it Hot Springs, Georgia? Hot Springs, okay. So he goes to Hot Springs, Georgia, where all these people, nobody knew who the Roosevelts of New York were. And most of them were poor. And most of them, and they just saw him as another sufferer. So they took good care of him and helped him. And this was really the only physical amelioration of his pain he ever knew, was going to Hot Springs, Georgia. He died there many years later. Well, when he became president, and he's known for the New Deal, and he's known for getting us out of the Depression, and he's known for his extraordinary compassion for the millions and millions of people in this country who were suffering through the Depression. Now, Franklin Roosevelt was born of the elite. His uncle had been president, the Delanos and the Roosevelts of New York. There's no way he would have, he was protected from suffering, as it were. But that experience and those people who helped him, people that he would never have looked to for help, who saw him as just another sufferer, and how much that informed him spiritually to become the man that he became, to get the United States out of the Depression, his concern for people, the New Deal, and so forth. So I use that in the book as an example of how sometimes what seems like a path in our life that this isn't what I wanted, this would have shown definitely, if polio would certainly bespeak a limit on the physical plane. But as my book, Law of Divine Compensation, anytime there's a limit on the material plane, the unlimited nature of divine substance will compensate. So now what you're doing now, Chinese medicine, I think you said, all that you're learning, what there is no limit to is how deeply you can serve. And that becomes the question. The question isn't, dear God, help me become an astrophysicist. It's, dear God, how can I best serve? And what it looks like, I thought it was that. That didn't seem to work out, but I'm in surrender, knowing that what matters most is that I become the woman that you need me to be. And sometimes it's our failures. It's our disappointments. And that's what I talk about in that book. Sometimes it's the places where we've been deeply disappointed about what we did not get in life that has the characterological effect on us to make us people who are more capable later in ways we could never have even known to live the lives that we were really meant to live. Does that make sense? And it sounds like you are getting that. It sounds like, you're carrying some, it's almost like shame because I should have been in the other, I should have been able to do the other, and the Course in Miracles would not necessarily agree with you. To say that we are all unlimited does not mean that within the realm of form we all have the same talents or abilities. But that does not mean we do not have unlimited talent and ability. Does that make sense? Okay, yes, sir.
Yes, hello. So my question would be, so when you say there's like talent, whatever, I would say like a calling, so you follow like your own calling, usually there's like a lot of resistance towards it.
Sir, I'm not hearing you, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Can you start over again?
Yeah, okay, so you said with like your own talents and stuff. And
your
like
own colleagues?
Your own talent.
Talents,
Talents.
okay.
Yeah, sorry, I'm French, my accent's
I'm sorry,
horrible.
my hearing is not perfect.
So you have your own talent, so like your own calling towards something,
calling.
right?
Okay.
But usually there's like a lot of resistance towards it.
Okay.
And like a lot of fear within kicks in. And so my question would be, what's your take on procrastination?
Okay, so are you saying the fear and the resistance is within yourself or in other people, within yourself? You know, when you become a student of A Course in Miracles, remember what I was talking about earlier when it's about you. If I think it's my calling and I have a calling and I'm supposed to do this, it's fearful. It's fearful. And then if I want to go out there and do it, I'm afraid you're going to find out I'm a fraud because I'm too scared to do it. I mean, as long as the conversation is about me and I and my calling, like some people these days, my work. You know, I mean, we have such grandiose, it's like get over yourself. We say this all the time. And that's what I meant about Gal Gadot. I love that line when she was in the military and she said, those 2 years are not about you. It's not about you. Your calling is just, your calling, my calling is no different than your calling, is no different than your calling, is no different than your calling. None of us have a bigger calling, a better calling. And all that stuff that we're into, I have a calling, it doesn't help you. It's actually fear-based. Because then what if I don't have a calling, or I think I have a calling, maybe I don't have a calling, maybe I have a calling, and you won't think I have a calling, and you won't like me because it's my, you know, it's really a matter of lightening up, you know? And when I mentioned how in in the Wonder Woman where she said, oh, my mother made me some clay and made it clay, and Zeus took it from there. I love the way she delivered the line, it was so casual. Yeah, my mother put clay and then Zeus took it from there. You know, the clay, you want to make the clay moist, so God can play with it and bend it into different shapes. So you don't want to take my calling. Don't take yourself that seriously. People who take themselves seriously usually aren't taking life seriously enough. And when you take life, like what's going on in this country is very serious. What's going on this planet is very serious, far too serious for us to be able to afford taking ourselves too seriously right now. Taking yourself too seriously limits your power. Makes you inflexible. It makes you scared, exactly like you're saying. Does that make sense? And that's, you know, the quote from Return to Love that's become well known. It's not our darkness that frightens us, it's our light. Because that's the superwoman in you. It's the Wonder Woman in you. And if you don't have a sacred context for it, it is frightening. But when you do have a sacred context, you go, well, it's not me. It's a power in me, but not of me. I'm not taking personal credit for it. That's the thing. The otherworldly power in you, you're not taking personal credit for. It just happens to be in all aspects of life, and not in you any more than anyone else, but not in you any less than anyone else. Does that make sense? So if you are doing, but you have to train your mind to get to that place. And that's why without a practice, whether it's the Course in Miracles or any other, because that principle that I just told you, it's like the difference in the Course in Miracles between the text and the workbook. Because in the text, that's the intellectual foundation of the Course, where you would read a principle like what I just said. But it's the workbook lessons, such as I read to you tonight, which actually train the mind to think along those lines. So my just telling you that concept will not make that shift. So from a Course in Miracles perspective, if you feel that the principles of the Course appeal to you and resonate with you, which are just one statement of universal spiritual themes, then it's doing that workbook that will actually train your attitudinal muscles, sir. Does that make sense? It's not a yes. I've gotten it twice now, huh?
I was also wondering about like the idea of procrastination.
Well, procrastination is just one form of self-sabotage. It's not about procrastination. It's about denial of self. You know, procrastination is not about procrastination. Procrastination is about not allowing yourself to give birth. It's about aborting yourself, right? That's what it's about. So the form of procrastination doesn't even matter. There are many ways to deny yourself and betray yourself and stop yourself. Fear will always find a way. The point is that it's fear. Oh, there are only two emotions, love and fear. So if it's a dysfunctional behavior, it comes from fear. And the issue is not to analyze the fear, because the fear is always the same, which is an absence of love. The issue is love. What's the love? That you're just doing what God wants you to do so the planet will be a better place. It's not that big a deal. Right? It's because if not you, because you have your part and he has his part and she has her part, and then you're just, energy that is not given to the light is given to the darkness. That's how powerful you are. So if you were not giving your energy, your talents, your abilities to God to use for God's purposes, it will be used for purposes of neurosis and pathology and dysfunction. Don't then go into analyzing, the dysfunction and all of that. That's not the point. The point is that it's the absence of the light. You say, dear God, use me. That gospel song, use me. Dear God, use me. And it's simply a matter of where do you want me to go? What do you want me to do? What do you want me to say and to whom? And then you just fly above all that stuff. And when you fall into it, you go back to your practice. You go back to reading the book. You go back to doing your exercise that day, and you are gently guided back to where you're either making it all about you, or you need to atone for something, or you weren't who you should have been, or you're not forgiving someone else. It's once again, it's got its own simplicity to it. We make it more complicated. That's not to say that it's easy. But it is not as complicated as we make it, because we're so busy analyzing the darkness in order to avoid the light. Does that make sense? Yes, sir. Hi.
Hi, Marianne.
Hi.
Hi. My name is Rumi. I don't want to talk about myself. I want to talk about a Wonder Woman that I know, and she's working on a humanitarian project, which is really great. And I think she needs help at this point. She's from New York, sold her apartment in Greenwich Village to go to travel to Southeast Asia to make a documentary about child sex trafficking. She spent a lot of money. She spent the last 2 years, and now she's in Los Angeles in post-production phase. She just started an Indiegogo campaign in order to raise money to successfully complete the project. So I just wanted to plug her project in, if that's okay. So that
Great.
You guys...
So is there a URL you want to tell us or something?
Yeah, sure. So the documentary is called The New Abolitionist Documentary.
The New Abolitionist Documentary?
The new documentary, yeah. So you can just Google it. It
Great.
will come right up, The New Abolitionist Documentary. And check out the perks. There are some great perks, and do what you can. I really appreciate it.
Great. The New Abolitionist Documentary. Great.
That's it, yeah.
Cool.
Thanks.
That's very kind of you to do that for her. Yes, sir.
My question comes from last week's lesson.
Last week's lesson.
Yeah.
You want to stand up just so
Sure.
that...
Last week's lesson, and Tears to Triumph has been particularly helpful with me. I'm looking at my notes. But it's a matter of dealing with an ex-lover and wishing them happiness being the highest form of love. So the situation is I was the other person in an affair, and we fell in love. We saw each other for many months, we fell in love, but ultimately he chose to stay with his current boyfriend and to not hurt him by revealing this. And I have been taking the steps forward to saying, he did not choose me, and I release him and let him go, and he made the choice, and wishing him happiness. But it had recently come into my lap that his partner had been cheating on him this whole time. And I felt like Clint Eastwood driving away from Meryl Streep, but my car ended up in a ditch. And that's what it feels like, and so my former lover does not know that, does not know this information, and I didn't seek this, I didn't go looking for this, from last week you said, of not wishing them sabotage, not wishing the relationship to fail, But this information has fallen into my lap, and I wasn't searching for it. And I'm struggling with, and I've been, meditating and trying to go back to lessons and talking to friends for now a couple months with this information. And I have a desire to tell him, to give him the truth, and I don't know what to do.
You really think that it would be like a gift to him?
No. No, I know that. No, I know that. No, it would not be a gift.
Pardon?
It would not be a gift,
No,
but
it would
I
be-
also care and love for him.
Oh,
and I
please,
don't.
no. Mm-mm.
Okay.
Care and love is as we do. That would be giving him pain.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
something that you didn't get the first time, really. That's their relationship.
Uh-huh.
You're not super clear about, they have their own relationship.
Yes, I agree.
And so what happens in their relationship is none of your business.
Right.
I mean, I can't see what possible good is there in your telling him that.
Well, it comes from a desire from wanting him to not live in a false relationship, but maybe that has nothing to do with me. That has nothing
To do with you whatsoever.
Okay.
And you don't know what's happened. You don't know what's happening between them. For all you know, the guy already told him. Or for all you know, the guy isn't doing it anymore.
Yeah.
And for that matter, he was doing the same. So what are we talking about? Like, hello?
Yeah, yes.
So, I mean, nobody is without their own craziness that they've had to work through here. But the Course in Miracles is real big how the work is on yourself. And your own cleanliness, and your own impeccability, and your own purity, and your own atonement. And what now goes on between them, I mean, on a certain level, and I'm not saying this like I haven't played all the parts, I'm old enough to have, but
Sure.
Haven't you done enough?
Yeah.
Really?
Right, yes.
Like, you have the courtesy to leave town at a certain point.
Yeah. Right.
Does that make sense?
It does, thank you.
Yeah. And so to just identify that in yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know that it's a painful where you are. I think a lot of people here know that it's painful where you are, but you're hurting someone else. The ego makes it feel like if I did that, that would somehow alleviate my pain. And it would for about 10 minutes. And then it would actually be more painful. The last thing that would display self-care here would be for you to hurt him. That would only increase the stuff towards you. What you do to others, you're doing towards yourself.
Yeah.
And that you don't belong in that gestalt right now.
Right.
That's my sense. Does anybody else have anything different than that?
Thanks.
And you know what? And it's all part of breathing through this pain until it's not there.
Yeah.
And if it's yeah. All right. Yes, sir. Do you have something to say?
No, I have a question.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm trying to reconcile the passage you just read from the book about analyzing the sadness and how you've said in the past, and I think you just said it a few minutes ago, not to analyze the darkness and to step into the light. And I think you've also said in the past, sitting in a therapist's office and trying to figure out where where you're getting these things from, whether it's your parents or things of that nature. You've kind of tried to push people away from doing that, and then it seemed like the passage you were reading was suggesting to analyze that sadness.
There are times when it is very helpful and very liberating, whether it is finding out what happened in your past or reading about certain dysfunctional patterns in relationship. There are all kinds of places where there's great insight to be had in knowing the genesis of certain dysfunctions. But ultimately, that doesn't of itself fix them. That's really what the Course in Miracles is about. It's not to say, so when I was saying that, it was in relation to procrastination. If you went to, well, where do I procrastinate? Well, my mother procrastinated. There's no real liberation there. Maybe she did, right? But, it's like we say all the time, it doesn't matter where you got that stuff, it's yours now. So I'm not saying it's never helpful to see the mommy-daddy stuff or the addictive stuff or the avoidance stuff or the sociopathic stuff or the whatever, or the trauma stuff, whatever. And sometimes information can be very helpful and very liberating, and it's used by the Holy Spirit. But information like that can also be used by the ego. That's the point. The ego, if it ends up from a place where it's about blaming yourself or blaming others, then it's still not your path to liberation. So it's one more look at the crucifixion, but do not dwell on it. You know, you can know how you played into particular drama in a relationship and learn about it and learn about that pattern. But still, what we're talking about here is still the ultimate redemption and resurrection and way out of it. That just, you know, somebody was actually saying, and I can say it publicly because she was saying it on a public call, that her husband actually in therapy acts out his murderous rage towards her against a pillow or something. I mean, that's from A Course in Miracles perspective, like, what do you think you're going to get from that? Where is that? Do you think you're going to then get rid of all the murderous rage? So does that answer your question?
Yeah, I guess so. The passage that you read from the book, then,
yeah.
what are you trying to say in that passage then? If it's not to, if you're saying to, spend time with the sadness and see where it's coming from.
Oh, you mean the passage from my book?
Yes.
Oh, I thought you meant the passage from the Course in Miracles. I hear what you're saying. The passage from my book relates with this gentleman right here. He was with a man, and you were in love with him. And you feel he was in love with you. And he ultimately chose to go back to the other guy. It's gonna suck for a while. That's awful. And it's gonna be there till it's not there. My whole point was his then giving information that could be painful will actually impede your healing process. So I didn't say, pretend this is not awful. And you had mentioned this book. This is awful. I've been there. I think there are people in this room who have been there. There are people watching who have been there. It's terrible. And it's a season of life. You know, it's just like if you were in a car accident and your body was bruised. You know, they would say, be real gentle with your body. The bruise is going to be there for a while. Your heart can get bruised. Your psyche can get beat up. And it's a healing process, just like your body beaten up is. And we have to move through that. And the quote I use at the beginning of the book, let me not squander the hour of my pain. But I think that's the whole point. And you're, from reading the book, you know those Buddhist principles. And right speech is one of those eight principles of Buddha, right speech. That would not be right speech for you to repeat that information. It is not yours to repeat. Does that make sense? And those Buddhist principles are important. And that's what that whole part of the book is, that only you're staying within your correctness and not indulging in correctness. And we were talking about that before, about when you're sad sometimes is when you're so tempted to get out of your impeccability. But only your impeccability will take you through this. Because any deviation from your impeccability is just going to make the pain last longer, exacerbate, like taking the scab off. And you have to start all over again. You were starting to heal. We've all had those situations. You're starting to heal from a situation, and then you do something that it puts you back. Like, oh, I saw him and I said, oh, I wish I hadn't said that. Or whatever. Does that make sense? It's part of your carefulness with yourself. Does that answer that?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and I think if you would see that in the book. So you go through it all, and part of it is, and also, there's a difference between analyzing the darkness and doing the work, not of analyzing it, but really transforming it, which has to do with atonement for your mistakes and forgiving other people for theirs. And you do have to go through that, but that's not analyzing the darkness. That's being with the darkness until the morning comes. That's being with the dark night of the soul.
Sorry, can you speak a little bit more on what
Pardon? Yeah, I wrote a whole book about it. I'll give it to you. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Not only can I talk a little, I can write chapters.
Okay, my question is in regards to my relationship with my brother.
Your brother?
Yeah, we actually have become a lot closer over the years in the last few weeks or so.
Mm-hmm.
And he decided to take this path of what he calls God and follow God and be with God. Now, with me, I've come to a place to be able to stand with him and work on accepting him and be however he wants to be and be with him. My situation now where it just come up to me is where there is the love and fear that you said. There's only two emotions, love and fear.
Okay.
So somehow for me, there's this place where I love him, but then I'm also fearful for what what path he might go to. And
wait, what is the path you said? It's about God.
He said he was gonna just follow God, and he just says like, God tells me things you wouldn't understand, like, but do these things, and kind of like a righteous kind of thing. He says, be this way, God says this way. Fine, no problem. So I'll listen to you, whatever you learn, share with me. I appreciate that, but I don't like to have that type of interaction where somebody tells me, okay, well, I know these things, you gotta do this thing.
Yeah.
So I kind of set that boundary, but I still talk to him all the time and whatnot. My question is really, where do I come in a place where I can stand in a loving place, but also not be detached and like just look away from it?
You know, it's so interesting because every situation is about a lesson in ourselves. So if you were the person, it is a gift to you. It's very easy to be our enlightened selves around people who say what we want them to say and do what we want them to do. I can be so great around people who say and do exactly what they want. We all can. But if somebody triggers us, that's why they had to come into our life, because that is showing you the gap between you and your Christed self. Because your Christed self, the Jesus in you, the Holy Spirit in you, whatever you want to call it, would be, that's cool. It just wouldn't, it would just, the trigger is not about him, it's about you.
I get that. That's why my
so
question is.
So in that moment, you say, God, help me here. Which is funny, because that's exactly what he's saying.
Yes.
Yeah, you say, dear God, this God talk is driving me insane. Yep. So self-righteous, so holier than thou, what he thinks I'm not on a spiritual path, and his is better, and he's probably, now he's going to say he's going to pray for me. Is that going to be next? Right? You say, dear God, I'm just totally in my ego around this. Please deliver me. And that's always, when I said before, I am willing to see this differently. So you notice it's all about yourself. Once again, as the Course says, the primary responsibility of the miracle worker is to accept the atonement for himself. Okay. So it's perfect, sent from central casting. Does that make sense?
It makes sense.
Yeah, and you just give that relationship to God and say, dear God, it's much like no different than what we were talking about tonight. There's nothing my holiness cannot do. In the space of your holiness, it's just sweet. Does that make sense?
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Anybody next? Yes, over there, a couple people over there. And then I want to see those. Did you give me the, where are they? Okay, because there are a couple that I want to do. I'll do those two, and then I'll do those. Yes. Yes, ma'am.
Hi. First of all, thank you for tonight.
Oh,
and
okay.
Thank you for taking
And then you, ma'am. Okay, yes. Hi. Hi.
Anyways, I had a couple questions for you.
Pardon?
I had a couple questions for you in relation to helping and I guess being our Superman or our Wonder Woman.
Okay.
There's so many things, so many problems, so many issues that I would love to be involved with, to help out with. It still happens that I'm at a time in my personal life that it's requiring my attention. And part of that is finances, which are limited. But even if that wasn't the case, we can't be in a bunch of different places at one time, and our finances somewhere along the line will be limited. So my questions are two. One, how do we live with knowing about some of the things that happen in this world without being pulled into sadness and despair? Even some of the things that are happening right this minute. For me, it's especially with children and animals because they're so vulnerable. And then secondly, are there things that we can do that are above the limitations of us physically and financially? Are there ways that we can be active?
I don't know why you would want to not be sad about what's happening today.
I guess
We are living through something so dark. Something so dark is happening in this country. There are some seriously undemocratic forces. We don't even know exactly what's going on. Look at what happened with this young man in North Korea. Look at what happened in London the other day. Look at what's happening with the issues of police and black men. They quit. I mean, there's so much going on right now that unless you're an enlightened master, I can't imagine you're not being sad. And I think that goes back to what that book is, which is we need to, if Americans don't need to be happy, happy, happy right now. We're in some of these problems because of too long spent in happy, happy, happy. It's like in that section I wrote with the yellow, cheap yellow smiley face. This is the time to be deeply concerned, really sober, and really mature. It's not a happy, happy time. You know, it's just not. And that's really part of the message of the book. Now, even a happy life has some sad days. There's so much going on to be concerned about. Now, American democracy is in trouble, but it's not dead. We have elections in 2018, and that's not about your money, unless you feel that that's, you are moved. There are so many ways to be involved. You said that you're particularly sad about children. Look at an organization like Save the Children. If you even give, it's so interesting about money and causes. If you even give $5 a month to Save the Children, you will feel differently. Because when you participate in hopeful solutions, it gives you hope. I always tell the story about when I was younger and I gave $16 a month to Danny Thomas to fight childhood leukemia. I always felt after that, we're on it. Yeah, we're on it. Because my $16 was going every month. You know what I'm saying? It's not about, as a matter of fact, you give $5, the universe will give you a zero. That's, if most of us, when we say we have financial limits, you don't have total financial limits. You have that $5, or you have that $10, or whatever. So if your thing is, or if your thing about animals, I mean, there's so much. The Humane Society, there are a lot of great organizations. And more than anything, when you look at, or as much as anything, when you look at the 2018 elections, I'm not saying either political party is perfect, but one has much more of a track record of being there to help children than the other one does, particularly given that the other one is now in secret right now trying to pass a health care bill that would take health care away from millions. So the hope is born, as I said, of participation in hopeful solutions. Grown-ups are concerned right now. Grown-ups are deeply concerned right now. Mature people are concerned right now. But we're also very, very aware. These institutions have to be bolstered. Whatever cause you feel about, get online, find out about the organization you want to be part of and advocating part of in legislation. If you talk about something like children, there's so many, we have 1 in 4 American children are food insecure. We have 12,000 children on this planet who starve every day. But there are organizations that have to do with global poverty. That's where those 12,000 children are starving. There are organizations that have to do with food insecurity among American children. Be part of them, and one of the things that they will have you do is to be an advocate for pieces of legislation. Once again, just get busy, everybody. Does that make sense?
It does. And I think when I was talking about limitations, like I do give to some charities, like you said, very little, $5 a month, to some charities that work on behalf of animals, neglect and abuse, and children. But there's so many others that I would love to help out.
Well, even if you had $10 million that you could give away to all the organizations that you want to help, even though private charity is very important, no amount of private charity can compensate for a basic lack of social justice. Mm-hmm. So when you could have millions to give away to private charities, but you have billions being rerouted away from the most disadvantaged people in the world. That's why it all gets down to politics on that level. And there you have an equal vote. So, you know, some of us have cash to give, some of us have time to give, some of us have, but all of us have votes and political activism to give. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And particularly now with those elections next year, we have a lot to do. We have a lot to do. That God help us if, I mean, really, guys, this is really serious what's happening now. Thank you. Okay, somebody here, or did we already do that one? Okay, and then we're done.
I wanted to say thank you for just, well, part of my lessons right now are I am not my body, I am free, and I am still as God created me. Mm-hmm. And that's been sort of the cycle for like maybe 7 lessons. Yeah,
it's one of the review sections.
But also, today particularly, it was God's joy is in my heart, and it's almost like I choose the pain that I bring on, because that's not the reality, because God gives me joy.
Right.
And also, I just felt like to be able to share that and hear all the stuff that's going on politically, because it's so, even the stuff that happened with, I can't pronounce his name properly.
Otto Warmbier.
I mean, it struck me in such a way that I could, like, not breathe. I'm a grandma. I have a grandson that age. So it was kind of like bringing up all this stuff and then going into hatred and thinking of dictatorship and thinking of the suffering of the women even in Korea. You know, it was just cycling around all that stuff.
You know, what happened there is so tragic. Ugh. And Americans are so naive. You know, I mean, you don't go to North Korea or vacay.
Yeah.
And not only that, we are selectively outraged. 1,300 American children die of gun violence every day. Yeah. So that does not in any way minimize the horror of what happened to that young man. But I think one of the ways we honor that is that it would open our compassion. And, you know, there are parents of people in Guantanamo Bay who aren't so sure that their children are being treated so well. We really need to all sober up here.
Yeah. And just one other thing is this whole thing with this administration right now, too, is, oh, God, going from the administration before and now to where we are, it's... Part of me is really struggling with that too, but then also there's a blessing in that, because I believe all of this stuff was actually, it's there. It's been like there. And there's people that have been suffering in some silence because it hasn't been so out in the open. Absolutely. And now it's out in the open. And
listen,
now it's out in the
absolutely,
open.
This was a perfect storm.
Yeah.
There's enough responsibility to go around, but I think all of us need to ask ourselves how we can rise to the occasion of this moment. And I think this is a moment for us to really be educated, to really watch the news, read the news, educate yourself about American democracy. This is a real lesson we're going through right now. This is such a civics lesson. I remember everybody said that at the O.J. Simpson trial. I mean, this is such a history lesson, like what the Senate can do, what the House can do, what the Department of Justice can do, what the FBI can do, what the intel agencies are, what the role of the president is, what the role of the Attorney General. This is a fascinating civics lesson.
Totally.
And the only thing we really have to fear is being disengaged. This is not about them. This is about you. There's so much to learn right now. Does that make sense?
Yes. And I think being active is.
And being active and asking God how you can help. But you know, guys, I feel like as a person, you know, there are 24 hours in a day, and because I think I live a very happy life, and these things make me sad. It's not, I mean, I don't find, for myself personally, my happiness as a person doesn't make me incapable of being sad about these things that are happening, but my sadness about these things that are happening doesn't keep me from being happy. And happiness is a generator of energy. You know, that's why the Course in Miracles says, look at the crucifixion, but do not dwell on it. That's why doing exercises like, you know, totally. God's joy and peace or mine are important to keep you up So that because we still have children we have to enthuse around, and people, friends we have to be there for. Totally. You know, you can't, if you just get so dragged down by it, then you're not able to be of use and of service to others.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Yes. All right, yes, ma'am, real quickly, because we're very late. I'm sorry, I'm so late. Yes, ma'am.
There's one thing we all can do, and it doesn't take any money. It's called signing petitions.
Is what?
Signing petitions.
Yes, there are a lot of petitions.
And there are good petitions that would affect so many things that we're talking about today. And some of them, they just ask for a $1 donation, and some don't ask for anything. But it's very powerful.
And also the phone calls to your congresspeople. You know, people really, this is something which conservatives are very aware of. A congressman does not have to get that many phone calls to notice. I mean, senators have to get a whole lot more to really take note. But a congressman doesn't. I mean, there are town halls. I mean, there are so many ways to be involved. Town halls, calling your congresspeople. I remember, what was it recently where something went down? What was it? It was one of the political things that happened recently, and I was driving in from Connecticut with my friend Jerry. What was it? It was something that they did recently.
The ACA, and they had to make calls to their...
No, it wasn't. But it was something that happened. One of the things that everybody's talking about. But the day it happened, and I got something on my phone. It was why I'm in one of those daily action ones, call. And I said, okay, Jerry, we're going to call. And I called my congressperson, and I called both senators. I said, okay, Jerry, you're going to do it. And she... It was very funny. She didn't even know, well, who's the other Connecticut senator and her congressman? And she just so got into it. And then she called all her kids and said, you have to call your congressman right now. And, you call them and you say, I have a constituent call to make, please. And, they say, okay. And you say your name, where you live. And I'd like you to tell the congressman. I'd like you to tell the senator. And I remember when she did that, of both the New York senators, okay, there are 2 Connecticut senators. There's Blumenthal, and who's the other one? Pardon? Who? Is that who? Is the other Connecticut senator? Well, I don't know who it was. It was one of them, because that name doesn't sound familiar, but it was my friend, and I could hear it on the phone. And one of the senators or her congressman, I can't remember, was the one whose staff person responded, thank you very much. As you know, either the congressman or the senator, I can't remember, has already been on the floor today saying that this is a moral abomination. It was one of the executive orders or something, and it was so interesting to hear which ones, and she was active and she was into it, and by the end she was all excited. Yeah.
About indivisible, if you
yeah, indivisible is a good one.
It's really helpful in training you to be able to...
Yes. Absolutely, absolutely. And enough for tonight. To those of you who wrote in, I so apologize because I was going to go over some of last week's lessons, and please keep me to this promise that I will do these next week, because I don't want you on live stream to feel that I don't look at these, and some of these from last week I was going to go over tonight. My apologies. Okay, as my mother would say, God willing, we will be here next Tuesday night. And those of you in LA, I'll see you on Monday. Okay, you ready for our final prayer of the evening? Thank you. I'm honored that you were here. Thank you. Dear God, in this moment we bid farewell to each other and pray for each other's happiness. We send our blessing and goodwill to all those in this room and all those gathered on live stream. And we send our blessing to everyone in this world and in this universe, to all living things. May our boundless love extend forever. We pray for Katronia, for Alicia and for Bud, for Isa, for Nadia, for Roxy, for Doran, for Anne, and for Kelly. And we place in the hands of God now, every problem, every burden, every vision, every hope, and every dream. And so it is that we also place in God's hands our democracy, our country, all of our countries. We pray tonight for the city of London and the country of England. They have suffered so much. And we remember that there is nothing our holiness cannot do, and we, each and every one of us, surrender our lives to God and pray that we be used as channels of divine solution. And now go forth in confidence and go forth in peace. For there are angels to your left and there are angels to your right. There are angels in front of you and angels behind you. There are angels above you and angels below you. There's a path of light already paved before you. God himself has paved this path. In every moment, walk within its light. And in any moment of doubt or confusion, reach out your hand as would a little child, looking for an elder brother who will take your hand and lead you back to the path and guide you in its ways. This is no idle fantasy. He is here. And so it is. Together, we all say, amen. God bless you, everybody. Thank you so much.